Yo, welcome back, ladies and gentlemen, to another episode on Forged from Iron. Today, we're going to be diving into back training and how exactly to approach it. We're going to examine the function and anatomy of the back in order to help you guys get a better understanding, and then dive into some exercises in which you can take your newfound knowledge and apply it in order to be performing those exercises effectively in the gym, as well as ensuring that you're safe and efficient when doing so. Before we get started, make sure to drop a thumbs up down below. It really helped the video and I'd appreciate it a lot. Only takes 2 seconds. Alrighty, so when addressing back training, we're mainly referring to the superficial back muscles, which are responsible for the big movements generated from the back. The other muscles in this area, however, are the intermediate and deep muscles. Now, these ones tend to be the smaller ones that you don't tend to see when you look dead on into a person's back, as they mainly are incorporated with functions such as respiratory actions or posture. Thus, when training, most of the time you're going to be specifically focusing on targeting these superficial muscles, such as the lats, traps, and rhomboids, for example. Now, the lats are the huge muscle that makes up the majority of your back. This muscle originates from multiple points on the lower back, such as the thoracolumbar fascia, as well as the sacral vertebrae. These fibers then extend upwards from the lower back and insert just below the shoulder joint. This creates the triangular-like feature that you see in most bodybuilders' backs and such, or really anyone with a good physique. You'll see this Dorito shape, as it has become known as. Now, some of the main functions of the lats are to extend and adduct. What this basically means is to get your arm down and back behind your body, and adduction, as we learned from the chest, is to bring something in, sort of. So in this case, for example, doing a pull-up, a common back exercise, it's going to help you keep adduct your elbows in towards your body, if that makes any sense. Basically, in other words, they help in keeping your elbows closer to your sides. Another main muscle in the back that we're going to be talking about are the traps, which actually lie right here, just around your neck area. Now, they originate just below the skull, and they insert on your scapula, which are your shoulder blades, as well as your clavicle, which is your collarbone. Continuing with the upper back, we touch on the rhomboids, which are sort of around the rear delta area of your shoulder, or you can think of it as the back of your shoulder. And these originate from the spine and attach onto your shoulder blade, or the scapula. So, looking at these, the trap muscles are mainly going to be activated through motion such as depressing the shoulders or elevating them. The rhomboids, on the other hand, while addressing the upper back still, are going to mainly assist in things such as external rotation or flexions, where the muscle is able to contract in that sort of direction. Basically, in summary, the upper back muscles all mainly contribute to movement of the scapula in some sort of way. And for those of you who haven't caught on yet, the scapula is just a fancy term for your shoulder blades, basically. Now let's take this into an exercise. To start off with, we're going to touch on the deadlift. Now, I'm choosing to start with this first because if you are choosing to include deadlifts into your back routine, you likely want to hit them first because of the fact it's the big compound movement really for back, and it's the lift you're going to be pulling the most weight on. But it's a very difficult exercise actually to perform correctly, and one of the easier ones to injure yourself on. So I think it's very important to talk about it and go over it first. Give it some priority, you know? Turn off your alarm, bro! You know, I didn't think I'd have bloopers in my videos, but guy. There we go. To start off with, there's 2 main ways you can deadlift, and that is conventional or sumo. And basically all that's changing here is the position of your feet, how wide apart they are, but it actually changes the fundamentals of the exercise a lot. Now with sumo, it's going to be a bit harder to get the weight off the ground initially, However, it's going to be a bit easier to lock out, whereas lockout basically means to finish the rep and get it to the full extension. If you think of it as a deadlift, it basically means getting it all the way to the top. And with a conventional, it's going to be kind of the opposite, where it's a bit easier to get the weight off the ground initially, but it's going to be harder to lock out. Now, everybody is different in terms of whether or not, one's better for you than the other, and it all depends on your own personal measurements and stuff potentially, because people have different leverages depending on their limb size and stuff. And so I would sort of recommend you try it out and experiment. That's sort of the way I found that worked best for me, is I switched back and forth for a little bit when I started deadlifting and just found what was comfortable. And that's what I would recommend you probably do as well. Of course, the form tips do differ a little bit between the two, but it's not so different to the point where you can't do the other once you've committed to learning one. I'm going to be specifically talking about conventional because for most people that's probably going to be the way to go, and a lot of the tips are going to be applicable to sumo as well. Of course, some differences are given, but these are sort of general rules of thumb that you can follow. The main thing you want to sort of ensure when you're doing the exercise is to keep your back as straight as possible. This is the hardest part of a deadlift probably in terms of form, and so you're more than often than not able to actually lift a weight on the deadlift that's like pretty heavy. But if you have a super rounded back, it could be detrimental in the long term if you keep doing that and don't overall fix it. In my personal opinion, it's fine if you break a PR or something with like kind of sloppier form, but it shouldn't be something you do on a regular basis. You should have some sort of training that has good form when it comes to the deadlift for sure. Conventional deadlifts are usually done around shoulder width, feet apart, and your grip is up to you. You can do either double overhand grip, a switch grip, whichever way you prefer. I personally tend to do double overhand whenever I can. Yes, you can hold on to more weight when you do switch because of the fact that it's just easier to hold on to the bar when your hands are in two different directions of grip. However, if you do screw it up a little bit and say flex your arm a little bit, the one that's supinated, you do risk tearing a bicep or something like that, and that's just no fun. So double overhand is one of the safest bets to do. Even if you can't hold on to as much weight, it's going to be good, and your grip strength will improve over time as you get used to it. Now, once you get up to the bar, you want to sort of line the bar up over the laces of your shoes, which is sort of the center. After that, you want to grip the bar, and then right before you lift off, I recommend taking a really deep breath and then bracing your core as hard as possible. That's going to be very important in this exercise specifically, more so than all the other ones that you brace your core in, because of the fact it's going to help so much in keeping your back straight. Mental cue you can also use is sticking your chest out a bit and flexing your lats. This will also help contribute to keeping your back straighter over the course of the movement. And then as you get the weight up, a cue that I like to use is kind of think about pushing the earth down beneath me. So that helps you initiate with your legs more so than sort of do all the moving with your lower back. Yes, you want to involve your lower back, but using solely that can often cause your back to round, and then that leads to injury and no bueno things. So ideally you want sort of your legs to be extending and your back to be bringing the weight up sort of at the same time. It definitely takes some getting used to, and this is an exercise if you're literally bottom of the ladder beginner, just starting day one in the gym. This may not be something that you want to tackle, but if you're dedicated and determined and you keep consistently going to the gym, you definitely need to include the deadlift somewhere in your training, in my opinion. It's very critical in terms of overall strength and even small things like helping your posture. So we've covered the lower back now, mainly. I mean, the deadlift is probably the only exercise you're going to need to cover the lower back if you're doing it regularly. But your lower back is also trained slightly when you do things such as rows or anything where you need to stabilize with it. Granted, of course, it's not hitting it directly, but it is training it in some way, which is good. And you should make sure that's added into your training. So like we said before, in order to train the lats, we're going to have to find some ways to get our arm back and behind our body, as well as downwards a little bit. And additionally, it helps if we're able to find a movement to get our elbows closer to our body in order to take advantage of that adduction function of your lats. So starting off, the most common exercise to train your back would be the pull-up. Or lat pull down. Now this is literally doing exactly everything that we said the lats function to do. Here we're taking advantage of both adduction of the elbow closer into the side of your body, as well as getting our elbow back behind our body, as well as downwards. We're going from a high to low position. Now, I'm using the elbow as a cue because that's sort of a point on your arm that you can take for granted. If you're getting it behind your body, you're going to be able to hit your lats. Now, for me personally, the lats and the whole back area in general was sort of harder for me to get a solid mind-muscle connection when I started working out. And so other people, I think, may also have a harder time being able to have a good mind-muscle connection with their back muscles. It's sort of like strange until you start working out, and it's like you don't know what it means until you know what it means. That's why I'm giving you cues such as like the elbow. Hopefully these things will help you focus on the muscle activation better during your workouts. Another really essential back exercise for your lats is going to be the row in some variation, whether you do single arm dumbbell rows or you do barbell rows, underhand, overhand, grip, T-bar rows, any variation. You're going to want to incorporate some sort of row into your back training, as here you can lift a lot of weights, and that overload on your lats specifically is going to help shape your back a lot, give it the thickness and width that you probably want. The row is one of those exercises where you're kind of hitting the lower back a little bit because of the fact that it's needed to help stabilize your body when you're performing the movement. Now, my personal favorite recently has been the single arm dumbbell rows. I've had programs where I'm doing barbell rows, T-bar rows, but recently I've been really enjoying the single arm dumbbell rows. And so I highly recommend this exercise. I personally do it. I just prop an incline bench up and then do it from there. I know some people like to just do it on a flat bench, prop a knee up. That kind of feels a little bit uncomfortable for me personally. Or another good way is to just simply grab onto the rack, but I know that's like in some gyms that's like an etiquette thing, and like only the super jack guys can get away with like holding onto the rack, right? So sort of it's your own call there. It won't change the dynamic of the exercise too much. You're taking advantage of pretty much the same functions here, except in a different way of the lats, where you're getting your arm back and behind the body. With rows, you want to be careful not to bring the weight up when it's too far forward. That will shift some of the weight onto your supporting muscles, such as your biceps, and rather than the lats. And so you don't want to turn your row into a super heavy cheat hammer curl. Basically, you want to really focus in on that mind muscle connection with your lats, which is going to help you row a lot of weight over time. And so when you're starting off, don't get cocky. Don't go out there and think, oh, this is a row, like I can just throw around the heavier dumbbells. Focus on the good form and the weight will come, I promise. I should have mentioned this earlier, but the golden rule to back exercises tends to be to keep your shoulders back and down and your chest up. The reason for this is because it optimizes your activation of pretty much all your back muscles. So shoulders back and down, chest up. You can instantly see how that sort of naturally arches your back a bit. And this is because when both of your lats contract, they actually naturally sort of put your body into that arch, hyperextension of the spine. And so don't worry about like when you're doing a lat pull down or something and you have an arch in your back. It's completely natural. It won't result in an injury. Now, I also like to incorporate some cable exercises into my back and lat training, just because I feel like this cable specifically helps me get a really good deep stretch as well as a really nice flex at the top and bottom points of the movement. To be honest, I don't even know the specific name for this exercise, but I just call it like a single arm high cable row, something along those lines. I mean, because you're doing basically a single arm row with a cable from a high to low position. You'll see what I'm talking about on screen. It's a really good exercise. I highly recommend it. Basically, the same rules kind of apply as if you were doing a row. Now, really just at the top of the movement, you're going to want to go all the way and feel that stretch in the lats. And then before you initiate the movement, I recommend supinating your arm a little bit, which basically means twisting it so your palm faces up, but not entirely, just a little bit. And this is just because, in my opinion, it feels more natural to be pulling and getting your arm behind your back if your arm was faced like this rather than like this. All right, moving on to the traps and I guess the upper back. As we said before, the traps are involved a lot in the movement of the shoulders in this direction where they're depressed and then they're elevated. And so we really only have one option, well, one main option. There are a couple odd variations and such. However, the main one people are going to want to do is the shrug, and this is because it's effective at training the traps. A shrug is pretty straightforward. I set it up in a squat rack. Basically, all I do is I put the safety pins on, and then I make sure it's a little bit below where my hands would land if just normally. So I have to depress my shoulders a little bit and get the weight up, and so because of that gives me a little bit of room to go down before I hit the safety bar. But in terms of form, the only really thing you can do for shrug form is to make sure that when you're shrugging is you're not kind of shrinking your neck in, because that's not actually, you're not lifting the weight with your traps. What you ideally want to do is keep your neck as still as possible, and the movements will be generated from your traps like that. I actually don't really know how to describe it too well, so I'd figure I'll just show you guys, even though you can see it on screen already. One sort of way I think about it, I guess, is to focus on the movement of the shoulders rather than the neck. Yeah, that'd probably be the best advice I can give in terms of mind-muscle connection and form stuff. But again, this is an exercise where you're going to be able to overload a lot, go super heavy, and so you might even get to the point where your grip strength fails. By the way, always do double overhand on traps. I don't know why you would do anything else. If you do get to that point where you're able to actually lift more weight with your traps than you can hold, you can use lifting straps. However, I don't recommend doing it all the time, as grip strength is still kind of important in my opinion. And so you can do it definitely sometimes, incorporate it into your training. But don't get to the point where you're dependent on wrist wraps to be able to lift a certain weight. And then finally, coming to a close, I'm going to talk about the rhomboids and rear delt region. I know technically things like the rear delt are considered to be a part of the shoulders, but you also have the rotator cuff muscles back here, which I guess I'm going to say are part of the back. Additionally, strengthening these muscles, just because they're accessory muscles in so many movements and help support and stabilize, it's going to just help keep you safer overall from injury in the gym. So it's important that you strengthen these muscles. Don't forget about them in your training. One of the best ways to do this is just a simple face pull. So with a face pull, it's pretty straightforward. You're going to want to take a rope and set it about head height, eye level-ish, and your goal is to pull the rope towards your face while your arms go in opposite directions. Now here, the main thing that you should keep in mind, and sort of the most important thing for this exercise, is to get that external rotation, because that's the whole point. We don't want to be internally rotated when we do a face pull. We want to get that external rotation, which will help with our posture and bring our shoulders back instead of them being rounded in. The cue for that is to sort of try to get your thumb behind your head and that will naturally cause external rotation, which is going to help you figure out the path and range of motion for this movement. Overall, remember the golden rule for back exercises: shoulders down, kept back, chest out. Alrighty guys, hope you enjoyed this one. Make sure you click the subscribe button down below. Also hit that bell, turn on notifications in order to keep up to date whenever I post information or videos regarding training in the gym. That's been it for today. Peace out.